Pardon me. Hate to interrupt but it is time to call the 10 October meeting of the Environment Committee of the Des Moines City Council to order. All committee members are present. This is a bit unusual in that we do not have presentations from the staff, so the agenda is, thank you for the indulgence, is to invite members of the Burien Airport Committee and our START Committee to join us and discuss our shared items of interest going into 2025, given the upcoming SAMP, which is finally happening after, I don't know, 300 years. I would welcome Joe Dusenbury of our START Committee, and please, Brian Davis of the Burien Airport Committee. You are Vice Chair, I'm led to believe. Good.
Chair Sarah Moore is supposed to be here. So.
Okay, well, you know, life is short, time is art, whatever that expression is, so hopefully she will join us. So while we're all, I'm going to gas on for a couple of minutes. I shared this sort of document because I thought it might be valuable to, and you know, I fully stipulate this is my view of the situation, how we got to where we are at. I would suggest that the SAMP really began in 2012 with the adoption of the first iteration of the Port's Century Agenda. And unlike our very lovely comp plans and vision statements, it is really a business plan, and there are targets. And they began, you know, putting forward a set of goals that is now the SAMP, the construction projects that will be under review. It kind of went under the radar. They would do presentations around Washington 2014, 2015. But I would argue that really airport issues came to the fore with this thing called the Flight Corridor Safety Program, essentially tree cutting around the airport. There sort of discussion as to how that got started, the FAA, the port, but the idea is to have, you know, cut trees around the airport or top them in order to create, you know, safe aviation. And the public cares deeply about trees around here. The city of SeaTac responded, the city of Burien, the city of Des Moines all stood up aviation advisory committees. And at the time, in the city of Burien, you developed an aviation committee to address Mr. Kripe's concerns over the 250 turn. I have this little image. This is a slide from our first aviation advisory committee, and I would note the notion was a lot to do with Next Gen and the FAA and a second airport, and really the idea being some sort of federal or top-down kind of a solution to things, and I'll come to that. The next page, our former strategic advisor, Susan Cesar, put in 2023, did a sort of a review of where we're at, because after 2019, the whole thing kind of fell off the radar, and she would report to the city, you know, from time to time, but literally only like a year apart. And I just want to note that the SAMP, it's a funny thing because you know, normally environmental review on major construction projects happens before things go into the ground. But in this case, it's just notable that the projects that really have a major impact on increasing operations and such began chugging along, starting in 2015. And in the meantime, you know, you had the airport communities, they weren't idle. We did this thing called a move-up study for ultrafine particles, which are the only aviation-specific air pollution identified. And Chris Johnson of Seattle Public Health did a very nice presentation to the Burien Airport Committee, to Quiet Skies here. But things sort of went to sleep in 2019. And that kind of matters because there really was a tremendous amount of engagement between 2017 and 2019. There were several public town halls, and there was what's called a scoping process with its own comment period, which I know is going to confuse people, but those comments from subject matter experts in the community were what items will be studied in the SAMP. Okay, they're not commenting on the actual draft, on the actual document, because the document doesn't exist. They're telling regulators how to design and what to study ahead of time. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So you have these, you know, two big comment periods. First of all, how do you design the study? What do you want people to look at? And the regulators will only look at what you people tell them to look at. That's sort of an oversimplification, but not by much. And it's also important to know that the FAA is the NEPA, is the national regulator in this process. The port itself is the SEPA official, is the state. Now, next page. So the thing is, a couple of weeks ago, the port announced that the comment period will open on October the 21st, and that at the time, you know, just going back 4 or 5 years, there was some, you know, discussion. Would it be a combined SEPA and NEPA? Would it be an EA, which is a less thorough, I guess, far less detailed environmental review, or would it be a full-blown EIS? And it's been determined that this will be an EA. Now, let's see, what did I miss? I'm going to skip over the, I'm going to skip over that. At the Tuesday Port Commission meeting, the port, you know, announced its aviation budget for the year. And I just want you to note, it's like page 5. The port has already gone back to record pace. You know, it was thought during COVID that it would be many years to recover the aviation business. That is not true. The port will achieve record operations this year. And if you look at the financial forecast for 2029 versus 2025, the first line in that table, what stood out to me is we're talking about a third increase in aviation revenue between 2025 and 2029. There's a direct correlation between aviation revenue and operations. So, you know, it's not like the airlines pay a certain fee for each operation. So it's not like they're going to make more money but not really grow the number of passengers and so forth. they're going to blow past any kind of forecasting that has been talked about. And I would just say that if you go to the SAMP, the official SAMP NTP site, which is run independently, it has to be run independently by this consultant, Landrum and Brown. The minimum amount of documents are there, but they say as of today that they estimate 56 million passengers by 2032. My guess is that they will get to 56 in 2026. They're going to get to almost 52 this year. They're going to blow right past that. So I would just suggest that the targets that we're talking about in the SAMP process are not real. And all of which is to say, I'm going to, well, before I get to the closing thing, I included a letter of understanding in the last couple of pages. Feel free to read it. I think I put the highlight part, but there are 31 projects on the SAMP environmental review at the moment. There are several projects that directly impact the operations at the airport, not the least of which is the international arrivals facility. This letter is an agreement between the city of SeaTac and the Port of Seattle in 2015, essentially to say we will forego our concerns over permitting on the IAF, because at the time the city of SeaTac still had permitting authority over construction. And they said we will forego this, our concerns about it, because we understand all of that will be addressed in the environmental review of the SAMP. But the IAF is not part of the 31 projects, even though it adds 8 gates and they would say 10% to their operations. So this all gets really hyper-technical really fast, but the fact is the SAMP is being built now. They're going to blow past any kind of forecasting that they have talked about, and there's been this almost 5-year slumber now, and your city manager has changed, our city manager has changed, Normandy Park city manager has changed, city of SeaTac is between city managers. It is clear to me that we are not adequately prepared, and that there are many stumbling blocks for us to get to a state of where we can basically comment meaningfully in this short window. So before anything else, I will be asking tonight if we can talk about extending that comment period into January. I think it's in the interest of all of our cities, because we're just not up to speed on even what to ask for. I had hoped that Councilmember Moore would be here and we could, but if you,
I believe she's on her way.
if you could bring that to, in case she doesn't, but that's really, frankly, we need more time, and we're in budget season right now. The staff have changed. The port's website is down. There are just any number of reasons why it's just impractical to. I'm going to take a breath and questions, comments, concerns. I know it's a lot, and I'm sorry, but we've kind of we've run out of time. Okay, well, I'll come back and, no, please, if you've got.
Yeah. Just a quick update and then a question. And
Please.
Brian, jump in here if I get something wrong. But we just finished up a policy group meeting. The FAA budget is in the can, and it's looks like it's going forward under a continuing resolution. There was some it does contain, I believe, some funding for the port packages repairs or study, or wherever that phase is right now. The other thing that it included was they're going to put together a national airport committee. And so the FAA is actually going to put together this committee to advise them on airport noise. And there will be members from around the country. So that process is going to hit the Federal Register soon. It would probably be, in my way of thinking, it would be good to have somebody from this area apply to be on that committee, whether it's one of the airport communities or elected official or however that's going to be made up. But apparently that's going to have some important role in how the FAA deals with airport noise. Most of the discussion was about state policy and pushing the funding for the port packages, air quality, sustainable fuel, decarbonizing the ground transportation. My question, and I'm here for some guidance. I certainly have a personal opinion, but it looks like they've funded another. What do they call that committee for determining another regional airport site? COG. Again, exactly what the acronym means, but even according to their own.
You really want to know? I mean,
They're really, well, it's going to be over $1 million or in that area. Again, this is the third time, maybe the fourth if you go back to the 90s. And even according to their policy manager, it went nowhere this last time because the governor would not back it, wouldn't come anywhere near it, and neither candidate out there for governor now wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So if it's not going to go anywhere, the question, my question to the city is, and maybe to the rest of the airport groups is, why are we backing this? Why don't we get them to spend the money on the study, the ultrafine particle study or something like that?
Thanks, Joe. And thanks for having us here. Appreciate that. I'm going to back up. So we moved to Buren a couple of years ago, and we lived on the east side years before. But as I've gotten involved as a member of the airport committee, I've just there's a certain place that I'm coming from, which is that I don't think anybody, and I personally, it's going to be a long, long time. We're all going to be in the ground before another airport gets built here, and so the here and now is that Seattle-Tacoma International Airport is going to grow, and there's no stopping that. And I think Des Moines and Buren are very similar in that it's our people that are under the flight path. And SeaTac is unusual in that there's no cross runways here. So it's north and south. And so if you live on the flight path, you're getting 100% of it, takeoffs and landings, okay? There is no question in my mind how important the airport is to the local economy, the regional economy. But I also feel very strongly that the people that live beneath the flight path are paying a disproportionate price for that progress. And so where the Burien Airport Committee, I think, has been moving is let's see what kind of compensation we can get for our people who live under the flight path, and also for the municipal government. So back in 1997, when the third runway was being considered, there was a study commissioned, and the consultant Helmuth Obata and Kasuth, HOK, predicted stuff that's come to pass, and in particularly in terms of municipal revenues, they predicted a cycle of blight that would lower property values and therefore lower the city's revenue collections on the property tax. So there's been some damage there, and there's been no compensation that I know of, at least not adequate compensation to replace that lost revenue. So I'm very concerned about that. The other thing from the public, so that's the municipal side, you know, because that affects our ability, or the city of Buren's ability, to deliver services to its residents. And I think that's a big loss. But the other part is that public health piece, air pollution, noise, and we've got people. Let's focus on the port package for a second. We've got people whose port packages failed early. We've got people that have been waiting decades for the replacement of those port packages. And it's terrific that the Port of Seattle has launched this pilot program, but right now they're focusing on 30 homes out of 9,000 that were originally done. I'm very concerned that there's a possibility that people who are equipped with port packages are now going to be told that they cannot get their port packages repaired because they're no longer in the high noise corridor. You know, because one of the common refrains is, well, airplanes are quieter. You know, so that high noise zone is shrinking. But you know, I have a colleague on the airport committee who is now outside the 65 DNL zone and might be out of luck in terms of getting her port package fixed. But then there's another thing. That 65 DNL standard is currently under review in Congress, and the 65, the DNL metric has been in place since, I think it was developed in the 60s, put in place in the 70s, and our knowledge of noise pollution has changed so much. And now there's attention being paid to elements like cumulative impacts of noise. So if you sit under the flight path and you got 700 planes a day going over your house, it's not the same as sitting under a flight path where maybe you have 100. And by 2034, according to the port's projections, we're going to have 560,000 aircraft operations a day, or a year rather. You know,
Well, that's 56.
You know.
But, you know, in other words, you're going to get to that point. It's an
Yeah.
underestimate.
Well, but as it is, you know, again, these people are paying an inordinate price, and I think we need to do something to compensate them for that. One of the things that the UW the Move Up study, you know, talked about the need for additional monitoring and testing. Nobody's doing that, you know? Nobody's doing that. There needs to be an air quality monitoring system set up, you know, so that we can get a handle on this. Well, there's one other thing that I just want to say, and that is that well, now I lost my train of thought, but no, that's okay. I just
5 o'clock, I have.
yeah, no, and I do understand that, and but
It'll come back.
yeah, it will come back to us.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'll yield.
I wanted to go through because Joe, you mentioned the shared start agenda, and my understanding is that, you know, each city can also ask for things beyond this. Specifically, when you talked about the noise insulation repair program, did they mention did the port mention where the funding might come from for you know, sprucing up that program?
I think they're just working on it at the state level. The feds
Well, yeah.
committed some, but not.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there was $10 million. There's $10 million in the Climate Commitment Act that was going to come out of that. Most of that has been stripped out because of the initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act.
Okay.
I did remember, by the way, the other thing that it's one of the criteria for this study on the SAMP that's coming up starting on October the 21st is cumulative impact. And so when I think of cumulative impact, I'm talking about cumulative impact on the projects that we're being presented with right now, but add to that the damage that's been done since the third runway opened, And then, when they open that connector on 509 between I-5, we have no idea
Okay.
what that's gonna be
So
like.
we
So
got-
we need to look hard at all of that. So,
Absolutely. So since you've got a pen, I'm going to give you a number to write down, okay? 1050.1. All right? That's the FAA regulation concerning cumulative impacts. And it will take you down a rabbit hole to something called the Council on Environmental Quality, which is a presidential committee which defines what cumulative means. And you sound like the kind of person who might read that. So I want to go over the shared start agenda just because, you know, you could ask the port to devote some of its own money to these port packages, you know, not to. The port will say that there's this thing called a gift of public funds. If you haven't heard it, you will. That they can't, you can't give something for nothing. It's at the core of like the grant program is why they need matching and so on. You can't give a port package to somebody without something in return. But there are carve-outs specifically in the port, the RCW defining port districts. There are carve-outs for exceptions. You could certainly ask for an exception that said, well, the port, you can use your own money when it comes to environmental funding. Would they, you know, want to do that? Well, you know, I don't know, but it seems like a worthy thing given the record profits. You talked about number 2, the commercial aviation work group, the second airport thing. I don't favor spending any effort on that for a different reason. The port itself, they really work very hard to say that the growth of the airport it doesn't matter what any second or third airport comes online. The port's growth targets are they're going to grow at the rate that they're going to max out whatever they do, regardless of wherever you build a second or a third airport. So I have never understood the effort, any lobbying effort on building a second airport, just for the practical reason that it doesn't do anything to provide any relief for us. You know, it's not like a burger stand where, you know, people will go over there and then it'll reduce people buying burgers here. It's just, it's impossible. And the port is the first to say that that's exactly the case. It's in the SAMP, it's in the PSRC stuff. When they talk about number 3, existing programs to enhance air quality, if you look at any ecology or PISCA or any air quality monitoring around the airport, they're always green. And the reason they're green is because they don't monitor aviation-specific emissions. So when they say that they want to, you know, support existing programs to enhance air quality, it's like, whoopee. If you're not measuring aviation-specific air, you know, air emissions, then it's irrelevant. And moving on to support, you know, programs to improve air quality in schools. I love children. I helped create 2 of them. I don't think Highline Schools needs any lobbying assistance from us. In fact, they got $150 million in construction money after the 3rd runway. They have been very effective. They got over $9 million in 2018 to get more noise insulation money outside of the Part 150 program. So they have been able to advocate for themselves. And finally, sustainable aviation fuel, it's like, I don't see how that in any way helps us. And I mean, so I'm just, my personal thing is that all 5 of these are just complete distractions from doing anything real for us. And I don't know how to, you know, how comfortable you or your colleagues, do you talk with people in other cities?
Yeah, I talk to neighbors, but so far in my limited experience with START, we basically go there and they tell us what they're going to do. Now, I think they encourage us to speak up, but for myself, I feel like I'm really what I'm repeating is what the few neighbors I have say. So my question is there going to be some kind of process at the city level? You folks have, Burien has a airport committee, or is there going to be some kind of process where we get citizen input on what we want, so that when I speak up at the start, I'm actually speaking for the community and not just myself?
Well, I'm hoping that this is a platform for that, and we can expand on that. It's certainly a worthy goal. And in the time remaining, speaking of which, I went through that little history thing because the consultants that we hired in 2018, we have a 4-city shared ILA funded with $275,000. It is, despite what your attorney said, it is administered by the city of Des Moines, and it expires on December the 31st, 2025. I'm not sure of the balance. I think it's around 75,000 left. And I went through the history thing because the consultants we hired on that 2019 video, for those who've watched it, they were focused on a largely federal agenda. The thinking at the time was that you could do something about next gen and flight paths and congressional lobbying. There's this Quiet Skies caucus of about 40 congressmen. And that's, you know, in other words, they really are experts. The one, Jim Allardyce, is he helped write Next Gen, and Emily Tranter, the woman in the video, she is the chief lobbyist for that Quiet Skies caucus. So they represented a particular approach at the time. I have wanted the city to consider bringing back some of the local talent that helped us with, in the past. They've been a lot more effective. You don't have to, retrain them on this stuff. But that's also a discussion, because the one thing that any attorney is going to ask is, what's the specific mission? What are the goals? So I would ask you to, again, hopefully this isn't the last of the discussions, but what would we want to achieve? I have said I expect that at the end of the draft comment period that the FAA will rule that either no mitigation or only trivial mitigation will be necessary, given that they've been building it all along. So you'll need somebody to appeal that. You might even need somebody to appeal if they don't extend the comment period. But that's a decision that I would hope, Burien would support and the other cities would support, because that it's up to the FAA to decide whether to extend the comment period. It's up to the FAA to decide. They will evaluate the draft EA and issue a ruling, and somehow you would. Councilmember Moore, please join us. No, I'm sorry. sorry, I don't see very well, and it took me a while to, yeah, yeah, welcome. And Councilmember Yoshiko Grace Matsui, Councilmember Gene Oxiger, if you have not met. I've laid out my arguments about extending the comment period, but it may be something. I'm hoping, first of all, that at least the four cities in the ILA will support extending it, and based on all the reasons I gave, but and also be prepared to do something should the EA come back as a FONSI, a finding of no significance. Since the port already has permitting authority, and they are the SEPA agency, then I assume that the definitive decision will come from the FAA. In other words, if the FAA doesn't find any problems, why would the port find any issues with any of the projects? But when you talk about cumulative, that's, that really is why are only these projects on the table versus all the other projects since 2012? That's kind of that's one of the questions. So I'm sorry, I've got, I'm throwing a lot at you, but the most immediate thing I think will be extending the comment period if possible.
Our committee is meeting next Tuesday, and I think that's a reasonable area for discussion. Trying to get an extension of the comment period on the SAM.
I'm sorry, I don't know how long you've been welcome, and do you have any comments at this point, or are you? Yeah.
I arrived at 5:30, so I'm catching up.
Okay, all right. Well, just feel free to, yeah.
As far as anything beyond, that's something we just got to think about.
Well, yeah, no, obviously, I'm just, I don't know what people know, and because the process, it's really interesting to me how there was so much energy. It was something that the city talked about, and your city talked about just constantly for 2-3 years. And it's interesting to me how an issue can be so, important at one moment, and then it just sort of drifts away. So I'm sorry for being overwhelming, but it's just, there's a lot of, but for now, the comment period definitely is something to extend, I would hope. Yeah, so I had one other thing, because it's something that you actually mentioned when I last visited, and I, because of the 5-year period, people really, it will be, and I've talked with a couple other people on a start in different cities, and there's a concern of how do you get people more to care more about it, to value the issues. People use this expression, boiled frogs. I don't think of it that way. I just think of it as like people have moved here 5-7 years ago, and they're like, well, I moved next to a freeway. What do you expect? Like it's just this thing. But every time I get an update, like on ultrafine particles, I mean, they completed a study in Toronto in July, and they made this, appears to be a causal link to excess deaths if you have a lot of ultrafine particles. This is sort of a breakthrough in that research, and if the things that are suspected, that have always been suspected, are able to be properly measured, I'm coming from this auto industry thing where they did not measure lead and regulate it for so many years, and you don't know what you don't know. We all just sort of, yeah. So
One of the things that I would personally like to see is whether it comes from the port, whether it comes from the state, but some commitment to that air quality, that pollution assessment. Whatever it takes to get a better handle on that. There was, after the Move Up study was released, the port asked a consultant to take a look at the Move Up study. And one of the things that struck me about the consultant's response was, well, it could be the airport, but it could be the factories in the Duwamish Valley, it could be the freeways that are in the vicinity, and that's all true. But let's not just leave it there. Let's narrow this down. Let's investigate this. And the answer may not be what the powers that be want to hear. But on the other hand, when you're putting people at risk, that is money well spent, and I would love to see somebody take that initiative.
Well,
Personal,
I go back to just the bullet point. It really will come down to, the version 1 of the, Burien Airport Committee, our previous airport committee. SeaTac had an airport committee, and SeaTac, basically, they ended their airport committee because they said mission accomplished. I mean, they got an ILA, and they really thought this is, this is where we want to be. Burien Airport Committee has gone through several versions, and I'm sorry to, but it's it all depends on the level of will and interest from the public. I don't know if you'll get hundreds of people. I mentioned the whole tree thing as being sort of an instigator because people do respond to trees, and that seemed to be a high motivating factor back in 2016, 2017. The SAMP had already been shopped around for a couple of years, but there was something visceral about, tree cutting that just seemed to be a strong motivator for people.
It seems like, just listening to the discussion, is that the primary thing right now is extending the comment period so that we can have time, all the communities have time to put together what they need, and it's not every community is going to need the same thing. So my question is, who's going to make that decision? Who's going to, how does that happen? Who's going to be the point on that? How are we going to accomplish that goal? And is START a forum for discussing that?
Well, I'm going to put forward a motion tonight to ask the city to, fashion a letter asking for an extension to the comment period and to shop that to the other cities, and hopefully all of the cities involved in the START will support that. I've heard definitely concerns from Federal Way and from, Burien. So hopefully every city is on board that we would benefit from more time, and it's the fair thing to do. But we'll find out. I don't think it'll be as effective if without that support from. So that right there will give us some intelligence as to how the different communities feel about it.
I believe Councilmember Moore has been trying to